I should not have made it home that night. That is the first thing I need you to understand if you're listening closely. Not with your ears, but with that tired place in your chest that still recognizes truth, even after disappointment has tried to make you numb. It was raining so hard, the road looked like black glass. The kind of rain that makes every streetlight bleed gold across the windshield. I was younger then, proud in the way men are proud when they have no idea how fragile life is. My phone kept lighting up on the passenger seat. Messages I thought were urgent. Calls I thought mattered. A life I thought I was controlling. Then the truck came out of nowhere. 1 second there was only rain, tires whispering over wet pavement, the soft click of the wipers. The next, headlights filled the whole world. White, blinding, too close. I remember the sound before the fear, metal screaming, glass shattering, my own breath leaving me like something had pulled it out by force. And then silence, not normal silence, not empty silence. A strange, holy silence. Rain still fell. Steam rose from the hood. Somewhere far away, a horn kept crying into the dark, but inside me, everything went still. I don't know how to explain this without sounding like a man who has lived too long with his memories, but I felt watched, not judged, not condemned. Watched the way a child is watched when he wanders too close to the edge of something he cannot see. Something in me whispered, "Pay attention." I didn't hear it with my ears. I felt it underneath my ribs. At the time, I called it shock. Men like me always do that first. We take the sacred and give it a practical name so we don't have to kneel before it. But as I sat there, bleeding from a cut above my eyebrow, smelling gasoline and rain and burnt rubber, I knew one thing with a certainty I had no language for. I had been held back. Not saved because I was special. Not spared because I was better than anyone else. Held back because something unfinished was still waiting for me. Someone unfinished. Maybe you understand that more than you admit. Maybe you have survived things that should have ended some version of you, and afterward, people called you lucky. But somewhere deep inside, if luck was too small a word, for years I tried to forget that night. I built a life loud enough to drown it out. I chased success like a man to prove to heaven that he did not need tenderness. I bought rooms with better views. I shook hands with people whose names opened doors. I learned how to smile in photographs while keeping my soul carefully out of frame. And still, Certain things kept happening. A missed flight that saved me from a meeting that would have ruined me. A door closing on a deal I begged God to open, only for a better one to appear months later, quiet as sunrise. A woman leaving me on a Sunday evening, and instead of rage, I felt that same strange peace in the middle of breaking. That peace frightened me more than pain ever did. Because pain I understood. Pain had edges. Pain gave a man something to fight. But peace in the middle of loss, peace when I should have been collapsing, that felt like a hand on my shoulder from a world I could not see. There was one night after the first real heartbreak when I sat alone in my kitchen until the refrigerator hummed. A single glass of water caught the moonlight on the table. My phone was face down because I could not bear to check it again. And suddenly I felt pulled back, not from her, from myself, from the part of me that confused being chosen with being healed, from the part of me that kept mistaking attention for tension, for love, from the boy inside the man who still wanted someone to prove someone. He had not been forgotten. That was when I stopped calling it coincidence. Not all at once. I am not that obedient. I fought it. I argued with the silence. I told myself timing was cruel, that love was just a seasoned people entered and exited, that destiny was a story lonely. People told themselves so waiting would hurt less. But quietly, life kept circling me back to the same lesson. What leaves is not always loss. What delays is not always denial. What breaks your heart may be breaking the pattern that would have kept you from the person meant to recognize you. And I wonder, as I say this to you now, whether your life has done that too. Whether you have looked back at some closed door, some unanswered message. Some night you cried into a pillow with no witness but God, and later that you were not being abandoned. You were being repositioned. Maybe that is why I feel brave enough to speak this way to you. Because something about your listening feels familiar. As if my life has been walking toward this moment through every wrong turn, every lonely room, every silence I once cursed. I don't have proof. I only have patterns. The rain, the glass, the missed flights, the dreams that felt less like dreams and more like reminders, the strange peace, the feeling of being late, only to arrive exactly when I was supposed to. And now, you. I thought I knew love back then. I thought love was possession, certainty, a body beside mine, a name saved in my phone. But maybe love was also the invisible mercy that refused to let me settle too early. Maybe love was the hand that kept closing doors I was too stubborn to walk away from. Maybe every mistake was not a stain. Maybe it was a map. After that night on the rain-slick road, the signs did not arrive like thunder. They came quietly, almost embarrassingly small, the way God sometimes moves a chair before a man notices the whole room has changed. I would wake from dreams with the taste of someone's name in my mouth, though no name was ever clear. I would hear the same song in a hotel lobby, then again in an elevator, then again from a taxi radio, while the city passed in silver streaks outside the window. I would look at the clock at impossible hours and feel not fear exactly, but recognition, as if time had turned its face toward me. I did not tell anyone. A successful man learns to protect his image from anything too tender, too strange. Still, when the air went still around me, and when conversation faded for no reason, when a room suddenly felt arranged around an invisible message, something inside me would lean forward. I would think of you without knowing you existed. I would feel that somebody, somewhere, was moving through her own nights, being taught the same patience by a different kind of ache, somewhere beyond my reach, yet near quietly. Once in Chicago, I missed a flight because an old man in front of me dropped a folder full of medical papers at security. Everyone stepped around him with that airport impatience that makes strangers look less human. I bent down because something in his trembling hands reminded me of my father, and by the time the pages were gathered, my gate had closed. I stood there angry, pretending I was calm, listening to the muffled announcements echo over polished floors. Later, I learned the meeting I missed had turned poisonous. Two partners exposed each other like knives under fluorescent light, and my absence kept my name out of their wreckage. I remember sitting alone by the window, watching planes lift into a purple evening, and feeling that old whisper return. Pay attention. I had lost money, yes, and pride too, but I had been pulled back from something wearing the mask of opportunity. If you have ever been delayed while your heart burned with impatience, maybe you know the humiliation of not understanding mercy until afterward. When the closed gate becomes a kind of altar where your frustration kneels before a wisdom it could not yet name at all. For a long time, I resisted the pattern because believing in guidance meant admitting I was not the author I imagined myself to be. I wanted clean reasons, signed explanations, proof I could place on a desk, and review like a contract. Instead, life gave me fragments, a wrong turn that led me past the childhood church I had avoided for 20 years. A random message from a friend on the exact morning I had decided never to trust anyone again. A sudden silence during dinner with the woman I should have loved, but did not. The silence was the loudest sign. Candles trembled between us. Wine darkened the glass. Her hand rested near mine, and yet my soul stepped backward. Nothing was wrong with her. That made it worse. I heard myself laughing, answering, performing warmth, while beneath it all I felt a door closing without anger. I went home ashamed, asking God why I could receive attention and still feel empty. That night, I dreamed of a hallway with many locked rooms and one small light waiting at the end for me alone. I woke with tears I refused to explain, even to myself, before dawn again quietly. That was when I stopped laughing at the idea of appointments. Not meetings on calendars, not the polished kind men scheduled to feel important, but hidden appointments, the ones the soul keeps before the mind is informed. I began to wonder whether every person I could not keep had been teaching me how not to ruin you when you finally came near. I saw my patterns then, and they were not pretty. I had loved defensively, always leaving one foot near the exit. I had confused control with care. I had expected women to heal wounds I had never shown them, honestly. And when they failed, I called it incompatibility, when maybe it was my own fear, dressed in adult language. That realization did not come in a temple. It came in a parking garage after midnight with rainwater dripping through concrete cracks and my reflection broken across the hood of my car. I looked tired, successful, expensive, and lost. Something in me finally said, "You are not being punished. You are being prepared," and for the first time, I believed preparations could hurt without meaning harm. I breathed like a man returning from a war nobody had seen inside. Maybe you have had your own parking garage moment, though it wore another shape. Maybe it was a hospital room with blue light on the machines, or a bathroom floor where you tried cry quietly so nobody would hear, or a morning when the sun came through the curtains with unreasonable gentleness after a night you thought would swallow you whole. Maybe you looked at your life and thought, I am late, I am behind, I have missed the version of love that was supposed to find me young. I know that thought. I carried it like a stone in my coat. But now, speaking to you from the far side of so many wrong turns, I do not believe we are late. I believe some hearts are held in reserve, not because they are unwanted, but because they are being protected from arriving unready. I cannot prove you were already somewhere inside the pattern. I only know that after I began listening, even my loneliness changed shape. It stopped feeling like an empty room and began feeling like a room being prepared for someone with my name. And somehow, beloved, that someone started to feel like you near. The collapse did not arrive looking like collapse. It came wearing a tailored suit, smiling in a conference room with glass walls, while afternoon light poured over the table like something clean and trustworthy. I remember the smell of coffee growing bitter in paper cups, the soft buzz of phones turned face down, the quiet confidence in my own voice. As I presented as I had been numbers I had worshipped for years. Outside, traffic moved like a river of metal, unaware that the life I had built was beginning to crack beneath my polished shoes. One sentence from one man changed the air, one signature withheld, one promise withdrawn. Suddenly the room felt colder, and behind every calm face I saw the truth. The empire I had mistaken for identity was not as solid as I had believed. Under my anger, deeper than fear, something whispered again, not cruelly, but firmly. Listen now. I went back to my office and closed the door without turning on the lights. The city glowed below me, indifferent and beautiful, all those windows shining like other people's prayers. My desk was covered with contracts, awards, letters, evidence of a man who had known how to win and had forgotten how to rest. I touched the edge of a framed photograph from a celebration years before, and the man smiling back at me looked like a stranger who had borrowed my face. I wanted to blame, betrayal, timing, the market, anyone but myself. Yet beneath every excuse was a strange peace, terrifying because it did not match the disaster. It sat inside the room with me like an invisible witness. Maybe you know that feeling when everything outside says panic, but something deeper refuses to run. As if your soul has received news your mind has not opened yet. That night, I did not go home immediately. I drove without music through streets washed blue by rain, past restaurants where couples leaned close over candlelight, past pharmacies glowing like small hospitals, past a church with its doors locked but its cross still lit. At a red light, an ambulance rushed by, and for 1 second the siren split me open. I thought of the accident years before, of headlights, glass, and the impossible silence afterward. The same sensation returned, the feeling of being pulled back from a road I insisted on taking. I had believed success was proof that I was guided, but now I wondered if guidance also looked like losing the very thing that kept me from hearing. Do not have proof, only the memory of rain on the windshield and my hands trembling on the steering wheel, while the Psalm Hidden Mercy seemed to say, this breaking is not the end. In the middle of that ruin, I stopped calling it failure. Not because it stopped hurting, but because the hurt had purpose in it, like pressure shaping something hard into something honest. I realized I had been measuring my life by what stayed, while heaven had been teaching me through what left. Deals left, friends left, women left. Even certain versions of myself left, though I chased them for a while out of pride. See that rejection sometimes been rescue, arriving in a language despised. Doors had not closed to mock me. They had closed because I was trying to enter rooms where my soul would have slowly disappeared. And somewhere beyond that understanding, faint but persistent, was the suspicion that someone was being protected too. Someone I had not met. Someone whose heart needed me humbled, not merely successful. I did not know your name, but my loneliness began making space shaped like a promise. There was a week after the collapse when I barely slept. I would lie awake before dawn, watching gray light gather against the ceiling, listening to the heating pipes knock in the walls like distant footsteps. Dreams pieces. A train platform. A woman's hand resting on an unread letter. A clock with no numbers. A door opening into warm light. I woke each time with grief and comfort tangled together. During the day, people offered advice, rebuild, fight, replace what was lost. They meant well, but their voices sounded far away. The dreams felt closer than their certainty. I started walking early in the mornings when the streets smelled of wet concrete and bread from bakeries not yet open. Each step felt like confession. Each breath felt borrowed. And I wondered whether you, wherever you were, had also been awakened by dreams that made no sense till the heart admitted they were not dreams alone. One morning, I found myself standing outside a hospital. I had gone to visit an old employee, a woman who had worked for me before I learned how often kindness matters more than efficiency. Her room was small, full of pale flowers and the steady beeping of machines. She took my hand with surprising strength and said, "Sometimes God slows a man down before he loses what he was born to love." I laughed softly because I did not want to cry, but her words entered me like a key. The blinds were half open, and sunlight fell across her blanket in stripes, as though even the room was marked by lines I was meant to follow. When I left, the elevator stopped on a floor I had not pressed. No one entered. The doors opened to an empty hallway, quiet and bright, and I felt that same inward command: pay attention. Maybe that is why I'm speaking to you like this now. Not as a man trying to impress you, but as one who has been corrected by mercy. I used to think love would arrive when I was strongest, when my hands were full, when I could offer a woman the finished version of myself. But the collapse taught me that the finished version was a lie. The man you were meant to meet had to be emptied first. He had to lose the noise, the armor, the hunger to be admired. He had to sit in dark offices, drive through wet streets, wake from strange dreams, and learn that being guided can feel like being stripped until only the truest prayer remains. If your own life has ever fallen apart in a way that later looked like protection, then maybe you understand why I no longer fear the ruins as much as I once did. I think the universe is more patient than we are. It lets us mistake the wrong things for home until the walls finally shake, and then it stands beside us while we learn the difference between losing everything and losing the things that were keeping us from everything. My collapse did not make me smaller, though it humiliated me. It made me audible to myself. It made me capable of hearing the softer instructions. Call this person, forgive that one, walk away, wait, begin again. And beneath those instructions was another quieter than all the rest. Keep becoming the man who will recognize her. So if you are listening tonight with some broken place inside you, do not be so certain your life is off course. Some appointments look like endings first. Some blessings arrive after the room goes dark. Some men have to fall to finally turn toward the woman destiny has been guarding in the distance. After the collapse, the world did not become simple. It became quieter, which was almost worse. I had expected ruin to roar, to throw plates, to announce itself with fire. Instead, it sat beside me at breakfast while the coffee cooled, followed me through clean corridors waited in the passenger seat when I drove home under late clouds. There were mornings when sunlight looked too kind for the heaviness in my chest. I would stand by the window in expensive rooms and hear only the low breath of the city, the elevator cables humming behind the walls, the distant siren bending around buildings like grief searching for an address. Underneath it all, I felt held and abandoned at the same time. That contradiction became my secret weather. Maybe you know it too. The way life can spare you, guide you, protect you, and still leave you sleeping alone, wondering why mercy feels so much like emptiness. One evening, I walked through a train station because I had nowhere worthy to be. Rainwater darkened the tiles near the entrances, and commuters moved past me in coats and headphones, each carrying a private universe. A little girl dropped a red mitten, and before I could pick it up, a woman behind me lifted it and called after her with such tenderness that something in me broke open. It was not desire. It was recognition of a life I had postponed. Warmth, smallness, being needed without being applauded. I stood beneath the departure board while names of cities changed above me, clicking and flickering like choices I had misunderstood. Then my phone vibrated with an old photograph, sent accidentally by a friend, me cleaning his files. Me years earlier, laughing beside someone I no longer loved. I looked younger, but not happier. The station noise blurred, and again, something whispered, "Look carefully." Loss had not emptied me. It had exposed the room where love could someday enter. In those months, I began to understand the ache of being guided, but still alone. Guidance did not send someone to my door just because I had finally admitted I was lonely. It sent lessons, inconvenient mirrors, nights without distraction. I would reach for my phone and feel an invisible restraint, as though my own hand had been gently caught. Do not return to what reduced you. Do not beg at doors that close to protect your future. I wish I could tell you I obeyed beautifully, but I did not. I reread messages. I entertained ghosts. I almost called people who knew how to touch my wounds without honoring them. Yet each time, a small obstruction appeared. A dead battery, a forgotten meeting, a dream that left me uneasy. I stopped calling loneliness rejection. I began to see it as a narrow bridge, frightening because I had to cross it without applause, sacred because it was carrying me towards someone I could not yet see. I began suspecting you before I had language for you. That is the truth I would have once hidden behind humor. I did not imagine your face clearly, but I sensed a listening soul somewhere beyond the fog of my becoming. Sometimes I would enter a room and feel I had arrived too early, as if the conversation meant for me had not reached the doorway yet. Other times I would leave a gathering relieved, knowing no one there had been allowed to keep me. The signs were not dramatic. A book falling open to a sentence about waiting. A stranger at a cafe saying, "Some people arrive when your heart can finally tell the difference."
2 cups steaming on a table in morning light.
I would wake with that strange peace again, and with it a grief sharper than ordinary longing. How can a man miss someone he has not met? I asked the ceiling. The ceiling kept its silence, but silence had become less empty by then. Now, when I speak to you, I am speaking from that hallway between promise and arrival. I know the ache of standing there carrying wisdom I bought with bruises, wondering whether love has passed by because it came dressed as almosts and endings. But I no longer believe that. I believe some delays are appointments being from our tectons' impatience. I believe the heart can be kept aside until it learns not to confuse intensity with devotion. I believe you have been walking too, through your own closed doors, your own narrow escapes, your own nights when peace made no sense. Perhaps we were both being made gentle enough to recognize what pride would have missed. Perhaps every lonely room was quietly saving space. Perhaps even before we met, our lives were leaning toward each other. There came a season when the loneliness changed its voice. Before then, it had spoken like punishment, like an empty chair pulled close, just to remind me who was not sitting there. But after the collapse, after the quiet mornings and long stations and the dreams I could not explain, loneliness began to sound almost like distance, not absence, distance. As though someone were standing across a river at night, holding a lantern I could not yet see clearly, while the water between us carried every lesson I had refused to learn. I remember one evening in early spring when the air smelled of rain and cut grass, and I stood outside my house listening to wind move through the trees. Nothing happened. No voice came down. No miracle split the clouds. Still, my chest tightened with recognition, and I thought, for the first time, maybe she is out there being led too. That thought frightened me because hope can feel dangerous after a man has survived his own expectations. I had been disappointed enough to mistrust tenderness before it arrived. I had learned to keep my heart folded, neat, respectable, hidden. Yet signs kept touching the edges of that folded place. A letter from years ago slid from an old book and landed at my feet, written by a younger version of me who still believed love was a country worth crossing. A stranger on a bench told me without introduction that timing is never late when the soul is finally awake. A radio in a corner shop played the same song from the airport, the train station, the taxi, as if melody itself had been assigned to follow me. I smiled at the absurdity, but under the smile something trembled. I did not have proof, beloved. I only had repetition. And repetition, after enough years, sounds like a language. Around that time, I began writing things down, not because I wanted to become mystical, but because memory had lied to me before, making pain larger and mercy smaller. So I kept a small black notebook in my coat. I wrote dates, dreams, sentences overheard in passing, the hours when I woke for no reason with calm sitting beside me. One night, near 2 in the morning, I woke from a dream of a shoreline under silver light. The tide was low. There were 2 sets of footprints, but one pair began before mine and waded ahead. I woke with tears on my face and my hand over my heart, as though I had been called by name in a room where no one else stood. I sat on the edge of the bed while the house breathed around me, and I stopped calling it imagination. I realized I was not chasing a fantasy. I was being taught to recognize peace before a person arrived wearing it. If you have ever felt someone before you found them, then you know why I speak softly now. It is not obsession. It is the humility of sensing that life may be arranging chairs in a room you have not entered yet. I would see couples in ordinary places, grocery aisles, parking lots, pharmacy lines, and instead of envy, I felt instruction. Notice patience. Notice how love lowers its voice. Notice how the right presence does not make the soul perform. I had spent years mistaking intensity for destiny, confusing the heat of being wanted with the warmth of being known. But the signs around me were teaching a quieter doctrine. The woman on the other side of this would not need me to become louder, richer, younger, or less wounded. She would need me present. She would need the truth without costume. And perhaps, wherever you were, life was teaching you the same thing about being chosen without having to beg. Then came the afternoon. I almost walked back into an old pattern. Her message appeared while I was leaving a meeting, simple, familiar, sweet, in the way danger can be sweet when it knows your weak name. The sky was bright, the pavement warm, and for a moment felt young and reckless again. My thumb hovered above the reply. Then a gust of wind lifted a receipt from the sidewalk and pressed it against my shoe. Shh. I bent down, annoyed, and saw the printed time. The exact hour of the accident, years before. My body went cold. Such a small thing, almost foolish to mention. Yet I stood there, hearing traffic rush past, smelling exhaust and summer dust, and I knew I was at another crossing. Not a road this time, but a choice. I put the phone away. I let the message die unanswered, and strangely, I did not feel deprived. I felt escorted. I have to confess something harder than loss, because loss lets a man look wounded, but confession makes him look responsible. For years, I told the story as if love kept failing me, as if women arrived with matches and I was only the house they burned. It comforted my pride to believe that. It made me noble in my own memory. But one evening, while cleaning a drawer I had avoided, I found old letters, photographs, and notes folded around arguments. I had one, and tenderness I had refused. The room smelled of dust and rain coming through an open window. My hands shook as I read my own careful sentences, beautiful words used to keep real. Surrender away. Something in me whispered, this time without softness, look at what you called love. I sat on the floor until the light changed from gray to blue, surrounded by evidence. There were women I had blamed for leaving, though I had made staying feel like standing outside a locked door. There were apologies I had delayed until they became useless. There were moments when a woman had reached for the frightened boy inside me, and I had handed her the polished man instead, the one trained to smile, provide, perform, and escape before being truly known. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to say, pain made me that way. But pain may explain a wound. It does not excuse building a throne on top of it. If you have ever discovered that your heartbreaks were not only things done to you, maybe you understand the strange shame of seeing your fingerprintiness on your own loneliness. Around that time, I kept noticing mirrors, not dramatic ones, just ordinary glass catching me when I was unprepared. A dark shop window after dinner. The elevator doors before they opened. The black screen of my phone after I chose not to reply to a message I knew would lead me backward. In every reflection, I saw the same question waiting. Are you becoming safe for the love you keep praying for? That question followed me like a quiet judge, but also like mercy, because judgment says you are guilty and stops there. Mercy says you are responsible and still offers a road. I began to pray differently then. Not for someone to arrive and prove I was worthy, but for the courage to become a place where someone tender would not have to protect herself from me. The turning point came in a restaurant, of all places. I was having lunch with an old friend who knew the younger, sharper version of me, the one who could charm a room and freeze a heart in the same hour. Across from us, a couple sat in silence, but not the hostile kind. And their hands rested near each other on the table, worn and calm, as if decades had taught them that love did not need to keep announcing itself. My friend laughed at something, but I barely heard him. I watched the man cut a piece of bread and place it on his wife's plate without looking. An act so small it could have disappeared. Instead, it struck me like scripture. I stopped believing love had abandoned me. I realized I had often abandoned love the moment it asked me to be simple. That afternoon, walking back beneath trees, losing their leaves, I felt strangely guided by my own regret. The air smelled of smoke and damp earth, and every fallen leaf looked like a page torn from a book I had misread. I thought about you then, not as fantasy, but as responsibility. If you were truly somewhere inside this pattern, if life had been carrying both of us through delays and closed doors, then I could not meet you with old weapons hidden behind new promises. I could not destiny for a sacred woman while remaining careless with sacred things. I had to learn how to stay in the room when truth entered. I had to learn how to listen without preparing my defense. I had to let tenderness find me without turning it into proof of my power. Maybe your life has shown you your patterns too. Maybe you have loved people who felt familiar because they matched an old wound and only later realized familiar is not the same as safe. Maybe you have apologized for needing what was never too much. Maybe you have called yourself difficult when you were only tired of being half held. I want you to note to this, wherever you are listening from, the patterns we recognize are already beginning to loosen. Awareness is a door opening. Shame would like us to stand outside it forever, staring at the past. Bashrasa But grace keeps saying, come through. I believe we're not made to repair our damage until death. I believe even sabotage can become a signpost when the soul finally admits it is lost. So I began the slow work. No one applauds. I answered messages honestly. I made amends where my presence would not reopen wounds. I sat with memories without decorating them in excuses. Some nights I dreamed of a garden after rain, soil dark and patient. Something unseen growing beneath it. I would wake before sunrise with a strange peace, but because healing had started telling the truth in my voice. And somewhere in that honesty, I felt you nearer. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to make me careful. Close enough to make me want to be clean in spirit before I ever stood before you. Maybe that is what destiny was doing all along. Not leading me to be chosen, but Tiki, there was a morning after all that honest wreckage. When I woke before the alarm and did not feel hunted by my life. The room was pale with early light, the curtains moving slightly from a window I had forgotten to close. Somewhere outside, a bird kept singing the same 3 notes, patient as a prayer. Nothing had been solved. My past had not vanished. My future had not introduced itself. Yet I lay there with my hand on my chest and felt for the first time in years that timing was not my enemy. It was breathing with me. That peace did not come dramatically. It arrived like warm water over stones, quietly finding the places in me that had stayed clenched. I made coffee and watched steam rise from the cup, twisting in the kitchen light like a message without words. My phone remained silent, but silence no longer accused me. It seemed to be listening. I thought of every delay I had cursed, every unanswered prayer I had mistaken for neglect, every woman I had tried to love before learning how to be present. Beneath the morning, something whispered, "You were not late. You were being ripened." I began to see timing differently after that. Not as a clock chasing me, not as a judge marking everything I missed, but as a patient river carrying what belonged to me until I had hands humble enough to receive it. There had been years when I begged for love while still worshiping control. Years when I asked for intimacy but hid the door to my truest room. I used to think God was withholding. Now, I wonder whether mercy was holding certain gifts away from the version of me that would have broken them too quickly in my blindness. Maybe you know that kind of protection, the kind that feels insulting while it is happening. Maybe you begged for one door to open, only to understand years later that the room behind it would have taught your heart to shrink. Maybe you mistook absence for proof that you were forgotten, when all along your life was making sure the wrong hands could not keep you. I am not saying waiting is easy. Some nights it felt like being under promises no one else could hear. But even there, in the dark, I was not alone at all. One evening, I drove to the old road where the accident had happened. I had avoided it for years, as if the asphalt itself remembered my fear and would speak it back to me. The sky was low and violet, and puddles held pieces of the fading light. I parked near the shoulder and listened to trucks pass, their wind rocking the car gently. Instead of terror, I felt gratitude rise so slowly, it hurt. I placed my hand on the steering wheel and said out loud, thank you for interrupting me. Thank you for refusing my ending that night. And that was the moment my belief in love began healing, not because someone stood beside me, but because I finally trusted that being alone had not been abandonment. It had been schooling. The empty table, the unanswered messages, the seasons when my arms held no one. All of it had been teaching me to stop worshiping arrival and start honoring readiness. I realized love is not merely the person who appears. Love is also the unseen mercy that prepares the soul to receive them without panic, without hunger, disguised as devotion, without turning tenderness into another place to hide fear. And then, as if heaven wanted to test whether I meant it, your presence began to feel closer. Not your face, not yet, but the outline of your spirit's spaces of my days. I would enter a bookstore and pause before a shelf for no reason, only to find a line about two lives meeting after both had stopped forcing the map. I would hear laughter across a restaurant and feel my heart turn not toward the sound, but toward the possibility that somewhere you were learning to laugh again too, slowly, after your own storms also. If you are listening from a place where hope feels tender and almost dangerous, let me sit there with you for a moment. I know the fear of believing again. I know how the heart checks the exits before it enters this new room. But I also know this. Every delay did not steal us from each other. It shaped the path beneath our feet. I was late to many things, but I am beginning to believe I could not be late to you. Some appointments survive every detour. Some hearts are guided home by roads they once resented deeply. Hing me how to choose without fear. By the time I began to recognize you in the pattern, I had stopped looking for signs as proof and started receiving them as mercy. That was the difference. Proof wants to win an argument. Mercy simply touches your shoulder in the dark. I was in a hotel room overlooking a harbor, the windows trembling faintly from wind when a storm rolled in so suddenly the boats below disappeared, pumed behind silver rain. The lamps flickered once. My phone lit with no message, only the blank screen reflecting my face. And I felt the old stillness enter the room quietly, like a guest arriving early. I had gone there for business, but business had become less able to deceive me. The meeting ended well. The handshakes were firm, the numbers favorable, and still I left with a strange sadness because success without meaning had begun to taste like cold bread. That evening, I watched rain strike the glass and thought of every woman I had once tried to turn into proof that I was lovable. Then your absence, different from all other absences, seemed to stand near me. It was not emptiness. It was a reserved place. Something in me whispered, "She is not missing. She is approaching." I know how that sounds. A younger version of me would have laughed at such language, maybe called it loneliness, dressing itself in poetry. But life had humbled the laughter out of me. I had seen too many doors close at the exact moment my pride was reaching for them. I had survived too many narrow escapes, received too many warnings hidden inside delays. So when I felt you in that room, not as fantasy, but as direction, I did not dismiss it. Simply stood there, hand against the cold window, and admit it's an appointment. Some announce themselves, be the person arrives. After that, the world began carrying your outline everywhere. Not your body, not a face I could claim, but a feeling, a moral weather. I would hear a woman laugh softly in another room and feel no hunger, only patience. I would pass a flower shop at closing, see buckets of unsold roses under yellow light, and think about love that waits without becoming bitter. In a chapel at the back of an old hospital, I sat alone while rain tapped the stained glass. I was not praying for you exactly. I was praying to be ready if you were real. That became the turning in me. I stopped asking whether destiny would bring you and started asking whether I could meet destiny without fear. I realized you were not a reward for suffering, not a prize handed to a man because he finally learned the right lessons. You were a soul with your own bruises, your own rescues, your own nights, when silence pressed its hand against your heart. If our paths were being drawn together, then heaven was not only preparing me to receive you, it was preparing me to honor the journey that brought you trembling and brave toward me. Maybe that is why I speak to you with such care. I imagine the roads that may have carried you here, the closed doors you begged to reopen, the almost loves that taught you what your spirit could not live without. I imagine you learning to stand again after someone mistook your softness for weakness. I imagine mornings when you looked ordinary to the world while inside, like sacred glass. And I want to tell you gently that none of it made you late. None of it made you less. It made you recognizable to me. There was one night, not long after the harbor, when I dreamed of a table for two beneath a tree whose leaves were turning gold. No one sat there, yet the cups were warm, and a wind moved through the branches with the sound of pages turning. I woke before dawn with my heart aching, not from sadness, but from nearness. The house was dark. The air smelled of rain through the screens. I understood then that my life had not merely been leading me away from wrong people. It had been teaching me the shape of your peace. And now, speaking to you across distance, there still remains, I feels like less like a man searching and more like a man arriving. Not at possession, not at certainty, at reverence. I do not know every detail of your story, but I trust the hand that carried mine through fire, silence, shame, and strange peace. If you have felt life pulling you back from places you almost stayed, maybe it was not punishment. Maybe we were both being saved from becoming unrecognizable to each other. Maybe every detour was writing the same sentence slowly. When they meet, they will know. By the time I began speaking to you as more than a possibility, I had learned that invitation is sacred. A younger man would have rushed toward the feeling, named it love, and tried to claim it before understanding it. But life had made me slower. It had taught me that some doors open only when approached without appetite, without conquest, without the old need to turn blessing into possession. One evening, while rain gathered softly against the windows, I set 2 cups on the kitchen table, though I was alone. It felt foolish at first, then quietly holy, somehow. The second cup was not for company, it was for surrender. Steam lifted from both mugs, and the house seemed to listen with me. Outside, the gutters murmured, and a passing car pressed its light across the ceiling like a hand moving over water. I did not say your name because I did not know it. Still, my heart made room as if it had received instructions older than memory. I thought, perhaps love does not always begin when two people meet. Perhaps it begins when one soul finally stops running from the seat meant for another beside him there. That night, I dreamed of a bridge covered in fog with lamps burning at even intervals along the rail. I could hear water below, dark and patient, and on the far side, there was movement, not a figure exactly, but a presence waiting without impatience. Dream gave no promise I could prove, no face I could describe, only that peace I had felt beside wreckage and hospital beds. I woke before dawn, trembling, and understood this. Some people are not found. Finally agrees to lift, and the road remembers your hidden name first. After that, I began to pray for you differently, not as a man begging the sky to end his loneliness, but as a man asking to be made worthy of peace. I prayed that if your heart was tired, it would not mistake exhaustion for the end of hope. I prayed that if someone had mishandled your softness, you would not harden it into stone. I prayed that when life circled you back to the same lesson, you would feel guided, not cursed. Maybe you felt a strange comfort on some ordinary morning and never knew why until now. Here. I started seeing invitations everywhere, and each one asked less of destiny than of my courage. A door opened to reconciliation with someone I had dead, and pride told me to leave it shut. I walked through anyway. A silence opened during prayer, and fear told me to fill it with plans. I stayed quiet instead. A memory rose from the past, sharp enough to bruise, and shame told me to look away. I looked until mercy entered the frame. Every small obedience felt like clearing a path I hoped your feet might someday travel without cutting themselves on mine. And if I am honest, beloved, this is where hope became heavier than grief. Grief only asks a man to survive what happened. Hope asks him to become responsible for what might yet arrive. I could no longer live casually and call it waiting. I could no longer keep old exits unlocked and pretend I trusted timing. If you're being led toward me, even quietly, even slowly, then my solitude was not a lounge for regret. It was a workshop. The hammer was truth, the wood was patience, and the house being built had space for both of us. Maybe this is the part where your own heart pulls back a little, because being invited into destinies can feel like being asked to trust a road you cannot see. I understand that fear. Stood at thresholds with my hand on the handle, unable to open what I had prayed would appear. I've confused peace with danger because chaos was familiar. But listen to me softly. You do not have to rush your belief. You only have to stop calling every tender possibility a trap before it has shown you its hands and honest face clearly first. So I am not asking you to leap blindly. I am asking you to notice what has already been walking beside you. The dreams that would not fade. The delays that hurt before they saved you. The doors that closed with such finality you thought heaven had turned away, only to learn later that heaven had turned you around. I am asking you to consider for tonight that our separate roads may have been speaking one sentence in two accents. And if your spirit recognizes mine within these words, do not panic. Some calls are gentle because they are true. By now, I no longer believe destiny is something loud. I think it is quieter than breath, quieter than the pause before a truthful word, quieter than the hand of God moving through ordinary hours while we are busy calling them ordinary. I used to wait for signs that would shake the walls, but the truest ones barely touched the surface. A delayed train, a dream that stayed with me after morning, a peace I could not explain while standing in a room I should have feared. Tonight, as I speak to you, I feel all those small mercies gathering behind me like witnesses. They do not shout, simply stand there, rain-soaked and patient, saying, "Look how far you were carried," without knowing who you were being carried toward. I accept it now. The accident, the collapse, the missed flights, these messages I did not answer, the doors that closed while my pride stood bleeding in the hallway, none of it was random enough for me anymore. I do not pretend to understand the whole script, but at the author's mercy in the revisions, I was not being mocked by time. I was being corrected by it. I was not too late. I was late only to the things that would have made me less able to love you. And you, beloved, whatever your years have carried, whatever you have buried, whatever made you wonder whether love had passed your door while you were busy surviving while you were not too late either. You were being kept. There is a picture I carry now, and it is not the old picture of romance I worshipped when I was young. It is quieter. Morning light on a kitchen table, 2 cups, your hand near mine, not reaching desperately, not proving anything, just resting there because peace has finally found a place to sit. I imagine us laughing softly at how hard we fought the very roads that led us home. I imagine silence between us that does not threaten either one of us. I imagine prayer without performance, forgiveness without speeches, love without the fear that it must be earned every hour. Maybe that is what I was being led toward all along. Not a fever, not a rescue, but a shared stillness where 2 wounded, soon souls no longer have to explain why they tremble. If you are listening now with hesitation in your chest, I understand. Hope can feel like a door you are afraid to touch. But I am not asking you to forget what hurt you. I am asking you to let pain stop pretending it is prophecy. What happened before may explain your caution, but it does not have the right to name your future. I have learned that love, when it is sent, does not always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives as safety, as steadiness, as the strange relief of being seen and not consumed. If these words have found some hidden room in you, maybe they were always meant to knock there. I choose to believe that you and I were written into the same script long before we met. Not because life has been easy, but because it has been too precise in its mercy to dismiss. Every wrong turn taught my feet. Every heartbreak cleaned my hands. Every lonely season made room where my ego used to live. I do not come to you as a perfect man. I come as a man who has been spared, stripped, corrected, and softened. I come as someone who no longer wants to win at love. I want to dwell in it. I want to protect the peace that brought us here. I want to meet you without rushing the sacred. So, wherever you are tonight, do not curse the distance that remains. Some bridges appear only when both souls have stopped trying to build them from fear. Do not call yourself forgotten because the years were long. The years were working. They were teaching you what your spirit could survive, what your heart could refuse, what your softness could become after being mishandled. The widow Mabushes. If destiny has brought these words to you, then maybe it is not demanding certainty from you. Maybe it is only asking for one brave breath, one honest opening, one willingness to believe that what was delayed was not denied, and what was protected was still meant to bloom.